So again, welcome. Today's session, we will be covering the schedule tasks, planning out tasks and putting them onto a calendar within ARM tied to the various trial actions. So let me close out of this presentation here. And I've got a protocol open here in my ARM. It's just an example protocol real quickly, since we kind of care about what's happening in this made up protocol. I've got just a pretend herbicide trial that we usually end up using in a lot of our examples. A couple different products that we're going to apply to two different times in over the course of the season when we get emergence, and then we want to go out and spray again 1 week later. I've kind of got this goofy setup from when we do our application training and trying to show a little more complicated application setup. So I've got a treatment that's like a tank mix. So it's got some different equipment involved, even though technically it would be applied at the very same time as the other two. So just real quick to show, there's 4 application codes, even though in a sense we only are going to go out twice to perform applications. And then I also have in the assessment data just a couple of assessments that I have planned out. And the assessments themselves don't matter too much for us today, but I am kind of wanting to highlight these because I've utilized the rating timing field. And this is a way to group if you have maybe several different assessments that would occur at the same time. You can put, even though you may have 5 different columns worth of data you'll be taking, they all happen at the same time, I can put the same rating timing code in there, and that inherently groups them. So ARM knows these are a unit. They're all together in that sense. And this is really, that rating timing value is basically the equivalent to our application code for applications, but for our assessments, the rating timing is used. So this is just the way that we're going to reference the assessments that we want to perform, is through this rating timing code, whatever we've chosen. And I did pick from the list. There is a simple timing list here where you can simply just, timing number 1, number 2, number 3, the 4th, 5th, 6th time that we go out to take assessments. You can use that scheduling. There are some other ones that dictate a little more about the actual timing mechanism when it should occur. You can certainly use those as well. Or even if you were to type in your own code, that would work too. The biggest thing for us that we'll see in just a little bit, in order to create a task to say I need to perform a particular assessment, or maybe several assessments, I need to use this rating timing. That's really the mechanism that we will leverage. Very easy for applications. Just to go back there for a moment, we already have application codes. There's no choice there to leave those blank. That's just the way ARM works. So we'll be able to use those codes to reference the applications. But the assessments don't natively have that, so we use the rating timing. And so that's kind of just why I want to hammer that home before we really get into the tasks themselves. Okay, so I think our timing, I don't know how much I have here, but just to talk through them again, so we kind of have the setup. The first assessment, we want to do a stand count, so we would do that at the time of that first application. Then the second column, I do already have a 7 days after the second application, and then the yield much later. we'll be able to use that or try to program that in a sense into ARM so it knows how we want to calculate that information to get the task timed correctly for when it should happen. Okay, so that's enough delay here. Let's get into the scheduled tasks. This function is just, I always use the navigation bar. It's just one of the different editors in your protocol or in a trial. Later today, we will get into a trial and see it's really pretty much the same as far as the interface goes. But it's either here in your navigation bar or under the window menu. We have the schedule tasks there or the shortcut button at the top as well, your toolbar. By default, the schedule tasks is empty. So in general, we've got this table here that will grow as we create different tasks. And then this top half of the interface is the different components of the task. As we create and describe the task, we will fill in the top portion. Now I kind of have a shortcut. If we wanted to, we could just dive into what type of task do I want and start to create some. I think it's a lot easier and a lot more intuitive to get going with this function if we have ARM do a little bit of work for us to start with. So under the Tools menu, there's a command to build tasks. And what that will do is, based on this protocol, or you could do this in a trial as well, ARM will go through my list of application codes and go through the list of assessment columns that I've planned out and create a task for every one of those entities. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on Build Tasks. And it's pretty quick here. I somehow have my study rules coming up. Let me close that. So now that I've built the tasks, I've got 7 of them created for me. They obviously don't have all of the information. We still need to do a little bit of work here, but it's at least a start. It makes it, for me, mentally, it feels just easier that now I just have to fill these in as opposed to creating everything that I need. So just looking down this list, we can see from the type column what tasks ARM created for us. And it's got one for application A, for application B, C, and D, and then also for the assessment A1, A2, and A3. And again, remember those were those rating type codes that I had entered. And then just to reiterate on the interface, this top portion is editing the particular task that I have selected in the table below. So as I click through and change the selection down here, you can see the interface is changing up here. You could also type in here, but that's probably not recommended. Some of these you really can't get too far anyway. You'll want to use the interface up here. All right, let's dive in and just start filling in some of these tasks and talking about what we have for options. So the type here is first, and that's kind of been chosen for us as far as, we want to create a treatment application task. That is what the task is itself. The next option then is the timing. So when does this first application need to occur? Well, we could, there's a simple date. If I just know what date I plan for this to start, I can put it down. I could put it down on the calendar, and yep, it's supposed to be the first week of May, and there we have it. And it'll go on my calendar. That's when it should happen. But really, the power here with ARM is that very rarely is there just a date set in stone. This is when it'll happen. Most especially here in a protocol, I'm going to go send all of these trials out. They all might get established at slightly different days. Hopefully they're all pretty close together as far as the season goes along, but there's very, very rarely that there would just be one definite date that something is going to happen. Typically, it's all based on other events, other actions that are part of the trial. So that's why we have this interval option to describe the timing. And then ARM can continue to update the scheduled date of when this would occur based on this interval we've defined. So I've got, depending on how far out we're looking at, we can do hours, days, weeks, or months, or years. Days is probably the most common one. And so for our first application, we said that the timing would be the emergence. So it'd basically be 0 days after our pest emergence. So I've got 0 days, and now I have a drop down to point ARM towards whatever date, whatever entity we want to calculate this from. So I could calculate so many days after another application, or I could go based on our crop emergence date or a planting date. Actually, so I think I misspoke earlier. I said our pest emergence date, but this would be our crop emergence date is my interval here. I want to 0 days after the crop emergence. And I do have, if I did have multiple crops, I can bring down a list and see all of my crops. In this case, I've got just the one. So crop 1 is the only linkage that I would need here. So that's going to allow us to really be more dynamic about when this task really will occur. And we'll see that a little later. We'll create a trial and actually kind of step through the phases of a trial to see how the task kind of mold and update throughout the trial itself. But let's run through the rest of these options, the different components of our task here before we get to that point. This next option is a way to instruct or put down limits for how much leeway you have on this date or interval as to scheduling wise. So you have kind of a plus or minus, so you can choose how many days before or after the planned date is it reasonable to perform this task. So this can really just be kind of a communication guideline type of thing to say, in this case, we would probably have a 0 for the minimum because we don't want to go any time earlier than the emergence, but maybe we can say 1 or 2 days. Would 2 days out would be about the maximum you'd want to wait before getting that first application down. So here in the table, you'll see that that's referred to as planned. Once we actually have like a date that ARM can calculate, it'll put it here and also in this box here. So if I had, let's just pick a date just for the moment to show that. If I just said it's got to be May 7th is the plan, you can see then that planned date is put here in the middle. And now you're saying 0 days earlier. It can't be any earlier than the 7th, but you could go up to the 9th if weather or scheduling constraints happen, there's that leeway there. So that's the purpose of the deviation. Let me put back our interval since that's what we really want. Up here to the right, there is a description. So that's just a free text, kind of whatever you would want to put in there. Since we did the build task, ARM just pre-filled, real basic application A, but you could put whatever you want. For an application, maybe you want the method, timing, placement type of information or something in there, or what treatments you're going to want to do. So maybe I would, put in something to know that those are all of our Stomper products that are going to be foliar, broadcaster, or whatever details that I would really care about. To just be a nice simple description. We'll see later on, we can actually send these tasks to Outlook. And this description is one thing that does show up in that actual calendar item. So that can be helpful as well. So anything you put in here, then you can see on your calendar, so you wouldn't have to go into ARM to check the information on what needs to be done. So whatever you want to slip in here can be handy from that in that regards. This next option is assigned to. So this drop down here matches your list, both the applied by. So if I hop over to an application, oh, we're in a protocol, so that field won't be here. There's the applied by, and then in the assessment data, there's the assessed by. There it is right here. That list, it's just a personal list that you build on your computer. That's the drop down in the task. So if you do have kind of a set of people, set of individuals that you track and have used for applications or assessments, you can assign an individual there if you wish. Certainly don't have to, but can be another layer of organization if you need to. Then if you want to kind of plan out how long this task will take, so you can see how much is on your plate each day, that would be the duration. If it's going to take an hour and a half maybe for our application, it could even be if it's going to spread over multiple days, you could make it last a couple of days. So options for just fleshing out even further how long it'll take and what days, to try to get as good of a picture of the workload that it'll take as possible if you want. Otherwise, the default is it's just an hour, and it's just sits on your calendar on that day, which can be just as useful as well if you don't necessarily need that level of detail. I guess the only other option here is completed. And we'll see that, of course, actually when you're in the trial and the task is actually done. Then we can mark that as completed, and what date. This will be what date was the task actually completed. So we'll get back to that later. That really fills in this first task. I can either click down into the second row, or there's also a next button that'll do the same thing and bring us to application B. So now application B is really the exact same as A. Just the way we have things set up. So I could just kind of replicate real quick what we did. We said the interval was 0 days from the crop emergence of 1, and we set this to be 0 and 2. And more info. And I guess we'll assign it to the same individual. Oops, this isn't like filling in my timing. There we go, 0 days after crop 1 emergence. Okay, moving on to application C. This one, we want it to be 7 days after the first one, I believe. So here, the same idea. Our interval this time will be 7 days, or I could do 1 week. But instead of that crop date, then we want to link to the application, specifically application code A. And again, we could do a deviation. Maybe again, we don't really want to go out any earlier, but maybe 1 day, you have 1 day leeway. Same thing as A, but we're doing it a week later. And sure, probably be the same individual. And real quickly, we'll do the same thing here, 7 days after application A. And 0 and 1. Okay. Then the assessments, really the only difference. Again, now we just have a slightly different type here, and we've linked to the rating timing code. We've got the same capabilities in the timing. We can choose from for whatever date we might want. So here we've got, this was going to be the same day as application A. And maybe it should happen right before we do the application. So maybe I could do 1 hour before. So you'll notice I used a negative number for the interval. So the idea is, and you'll notice the timing always uses the word after. So if your timing is actually, you want it before whatever action event code that you're linking to, if you want this task to be before that, you would just do a negative number. So this is really 1 hour before we actually go to make application A. I want to do my A1 assessments, however many of those there are. And then of course our timing, we really have no choice. That has to happen before. So we would have very little flexibility on your deviation. So there in the timing, again, looks maybe just a little bit goofy with the word after, but -1 hours after A. So the negative is really saying I want to happen before. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to do is let's do a stand count for our application. Now moving on to, assessment A2. This was going to be 7 days after our final set of applications. So we will do an interval here, a positive 7 days, so 1 week later, or maybe just for kicks, we'll use the weeks this time. 1 week after application D. This will fill in when you're actually in the trial. It'll have all of the applications that are there. Being in the protocol, they don't like totally exist just yet until you get to the trial. So we'll just keep sticking with our usual, hey, you've got a little bit of time of a delay, but really can't do it before this. So 1 week after that application D, we want to perform that assessment. And then last but not least, A3, this was our harvest. So let's, I don't know, we'll just make up the fact that it's maybe, I don't know, nine weeks after our planting date. I'm sure we could be more precise, but we'll just make that good enough for our case today. And yeah, hey, maybe you've got some leeway. It's harvest. Probably don't need too much precision there on the harvest timing. Maybe it doesn't hurt to have it on your calendar anyway. Certainly, if you just didn't want it, we say, well, you know what, that's kind of useless. That's got its own system, its own thing that'll happen anyway. You could always delete, an assessment, or excuse me, a task that you wouldn't want, even if ARM had created it for us off the top. No harm, no foul in doing that. Okay, so that's the nuts and bolts of the schedule tasks. And I did, kind of specifically choose to spend all this time in a protocol because an advantage, if you can, is to include this schedule in the protocol, because now every trial that I create from this protocol will have this same schedule. And again, one of the advantages is we're using this interval. So clearly each trialist will have things happen on different dates. The date itself, isn't too important. It's the timing relative to the the other actions in the trial. And so I think that's really where ARM can stand out, using this task management instead of a generic scheduler that you just have to put down dates. And we'll see that, try to demonstrate that in the trial too, when we have real dates, real things happening. But certainly if you're receiving trials, you're a trialist and you get a trial, it's definitely not too late. Everything we did here, totally possible to do in a trial file as well. You can start from scratch, build tasks, fill them all in a trial. No harm, no foul there. It's just a shortcut really to distribute them in all of your trials if you get it into the protocol. So let's go ahead and create our trial. And I'll just choose one of these planned out ones here. I guess just in case something goes wrong here, sure, we'll save our changes. Trial randomization, we'll just say, sure, that looks great. Okay, so now we are in the trial. As you can see, we still have all of our tasks just like we've defined. And so what we can do here, I guess first to maybe try to bring these tasks to life a little bit. So everything we did, again, was all using this interval. Everything was relative to something else that's happening, whether it's the crop emergence, another application, things like that. So we've just created the trial. Nothing has happened yet. So we don't have any dominoes to fall over and actually start getting dates for ourselves. So that plan is still totally empty. We do have this calendar editor right next to the schedule tasks. And this is a way to visualize the tasks we've created. However, it's not super interesting just yet because, like I said, we don't have real dates for when these things might happen just yet. So by convention, ARM just kind of has them all sitting on today's date, just kind of one after each other on this one today's date. but we'll be able to come back here and see once we start to get the schedule filled out, the tasks will update and this calendar will update. So we'll come back to see it a little more exciting here. So one of the advantages with the schedule task is really once you've created these, there's not a lot that you have to do to maintain them because ARM kind of knows the link. For example, with application A. Or with our emergence date. As soon as we fill in one of those pieces of information, just in the regular spot in our site description, ARM will then come back and update these tasks without us having to do anything. So for example, our first domino to fall, kind of the first thing that would happen in the trial is actually planting our crop. And that's going to trigger one of our tasks, at least, the harvesting one. So if I'm going into my crop then and wanting to document my planting date, let's just say we did that. No, we did that earlier this week. Once I have that planting date filled in, now ARM can update our schedule, at least a little bit. So here, our assessment for A3, now that there is an actual planting date, we can calculate what 9 weeks later would be. And so here I've got, June 24th as our planned date for when this should occur. And we'll also be able to see that on our calendar. So if I go forward to June 24th, there now we have that task for that A3, the harvest. Which also tells me clearly I didn't put out the far enough out into the future, but that's all right. So as we just do our usual trial tasks, filling in, documenting things that occur, these tasks will just continue to evolve automatically without us having to do a bunch of work. So our next domino to fall would be back in our crop and our emergence date. So let's just say that is today. Today's the day that our crop emerged. And that one's kind of a big one here for our application. So because we had the crop emergence, now we need to do our first application. And so there we have, today was the goal. Both of these were supposed to happen 0 days from our emergence date. If I go ahead then and make our application, then we will go in here and fill in that today we did this. I could certainly fill in all of our weather and whatever else we needed to document for our application. But let's say that although we were supposed to do it today, we had either some equipment problem, weather caused us to be delayed, something happened. So now we didn't actually get to do it the day we had wanted, but instead it is 1 day later. Same thing, of course, in our ARM, we're documenting when it happened and everything we did with it. But we'll see here on our scheduled tasks, both of these have now been marked as completed. So just by filling in the date in the regular spot in the site description, that's ARM's cue that the application has occurred. And I know when it did because you filled in the date. So we are totally fine though, because our deviation had it so we could wait 2 days to do that. Let's pretend that I had it set to 0. And then maybe I need to leave and come back here. There we go. If I was outside of my planned range as to when this should happen, then you'll see this red highlight. Not a whole lot else happens. You can't really help it. No point in ARM giving you grief, other than just to point that out. So there's just a visual cue to see if something was outside of this planned range. But nothing else. There's nothing in validation. No other place really where this is going to have any negative effects to the timing, but it's just a way to communicate that since we specified this range and this was outside of that planned range. So now that we have applications A and B filled in, that has kind of a trickle-down effect for the rest of our schedule. Now we know when C and D can happen, because that was 7 days after that application A. That also tells us, since we have planned days for that, now we know assessment A2, when that should happen, because we wanted that to occur 7 days after application D. So you can see our entire schedule now really got filled in. And our calendar should look a lot more interesting. So here we've got that assessment that should happen right before we made our application. We've got our application C and D a week later, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really the advantage is once things happen, ARM can calculate. And then if things don't go quite right, it will continue to update, continue to push back the entire schedule based on when things actually happened. So I probably should have pointed that out before we did this completed. So let me go back real quick and let's clear that out, because once we had this is no longer completed. Once we had the emergence date, that gave us a planned date for application A. I see, yeah, it's waiting until we've actually performed A before it fills it in. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll do what we did here, mark that as 26. We'll catch it on the next one over here. Oh, this one is giving me grief now. There we go, okay. So applications A and B have been completed. They have been marked as complete and everything. We're now ready to fill in. So our next domino, we could certainly do the assessment A1. That's supposed to happen on the 26th. Let's just fill that in for completion's sake. And we'll say we did fulfill that in time. We did that right before our application. Again, just by filling in the rating date, we have this linkage to the A1 code. So now ARM knows that the assessment is complete. So same exact thing, just filling in what you already fill in for the trial. These tasks will update, mark themselves as complete as it goes along. Okay, so just to show the timing here, we've got applications C and D. These are supposed to happen 1 week after our first 2 application codes. And that triggers our assessment A2, which should be a week after that. So we've got May 3rd as the plan, which means that our assessment A2 is going to be on the 10th. Again, that is planned, and how often do things go according to plan? Let's go ahead and say our application C, the goal was to be on the 3rd, but lo and behold, we couldn't get in until Monday. So that ends up being on the 6th for both of those. So the advantage we have, number one, we have a nice red to remind ourselves that, yeah, it didn't go as according to plan. But now that we have a delay in that application, you can see that A2 has automatically been updated to reflect that new timeline. So we don't have to push back, the rest of our schedule. Everything has to be slid back 2 days now that that happened, and we have to go messing around on our calendar. The calendar itself has updated automatically to be when we want to do that A2 assessment. So I think that's really the biggest advantage for putting this into ARM instead of just tracking it on your own. Is that ability. ARM knows everything about what's actually happening. What are the prerequisites to when this action actually has to happen? And so as things change and move, ARM can keep it going instead of that being a manual task for someone to do, is to be updating the calendar and moving things around. ARM will take care of that for you. All right, so we showed the calendar. That's in ARM. That's great, but maybe not super helpful for everyone to see. That might be part of the application team or part of the assessments. So you can also send these tasks to your Outlook calendar. So over here on the properties panel, we have a section here related to Outlook. Now, this does work really only with I think the term, the technology is MAPI, M-A-P-I, some software running on your same computer that ARM is that has a calendar function, which I think is 95% of the time Outlook. And because both ARM and that other program are installed on the computer, then there is this API, this communication channel where ARM can send tasks to that calendar, and the calendar can actually be updated. It can actually sync kind of both ways if needed. So we can't connect to like a Gmail calendar necessarily. It is kind of tied to Outlook or a similar program that's installed on the computer. But you certainly could, within Outlook, add your Gmail calendar into your Outlook, and then that would be a way to hook up to whatever calendar you might want. So typically you don't need to fill in the profile name or password or calendar profile name. Those can almost always stay empty. It's really would be if you're trying to, if you use different Outlook profiles, which I think is rare because it's hard to set up and seems kind of a pain. So those usually stay empty. The key, what you would want to do is this link to Outlook calendar. And this is pretty new. This is new in 2023 that we added this. Previously, ARM could only talk to your default calendar that's in Outlook. And that was somewhat limiting, especially like we said, if you have a team of people that are wanting to see the schedule, that are working on the different trials. We now have a way to choose what calendar you want ARM to communicate with. So in my Outlook on my computer, I have my default calendar that's linked to to my email, and then I've also have these three other calendars that I've either created or I have a colleague created and shared with me, and I have permissions to be able to create tasks on those calendars. And so this says home, another calendar, priorities. Those are the names of the calendars that I have special to me in my Outlook. So you might have a totally different list. Your list might be very short. It might just be calendar, and that would be just the default, the only calendar that you have in your Outlook at this time. So that's this drop down here is really ARM communicating with Outlook to say what calendars are available for creating tasks on. So I can choose which calendar that I want to share to. So maybe I have, the common scenario would be I can create a shared calendar that, all of the technicians have access to. And then if I put that into my Outlook, I can have ARM send all of these tasks to that calendar. And now everybody in that team will be able to see when things are coming up, what we have to do in the trials. So once you have that selected, then we just create appointments. And that's going to send any of the tasks that aren't already complete. So in this case, it's only going to send 2 of them since I've mostly through the trial out to my Outlook calendar. And it'll look basically the same as here within ARM. It'll be the same type of tasks, just in Outlook instead. And once you do that, there's this link to Outlook that'll get filled in. And so it is actually a link in the fact that as things get updated in ARM, when you open up this trial, ARM will communicate back with Outlook again and update the tasks. So if you mark them as complete, if they move, like we had the scenario here where suddenly it's moved because of a change, just opening the trial in ARM will get that calendar to update. You don't have to press anything special. It'll just do that automatically. Okay, one more scenario with the calendar. So we showed the calendar in ARM. This is specifically the tasks in this one trial. You can also view all of the tasks in all of your trials with the master calendar. So that's again in the navigation bar. These are all the different editors in this one particular trial. Underneath that, there is the master calendar. And I didn't really prepare other trials to be in my study list, so I don't know that there's much here, but this master calendar will be what you see in the regular calendar, but for every trial in your study list. So this can be real nice to see everything that's going on in all of the trials that we're working on, not just one. Certainly, you could do the Outlook instead. That's a good way to compile all of those tasks, but this would be just another option that can be accessed within ARM. Let me save this. So if you can also get to this. I'm just going to close this one trial. When you open ARM without a file open, you're on the study list, and you have the master calendar here on the left that you can open up as well. Hopefully that kind of reiterates that connection with the study list. Every trial that was in my list, all of those tasks are here in my calendar. And I have cleaned out my list recently, so I don't have a lot of trials. Otherwise, you end up with a bunch. And on the right, there are some filtering if you want to narrow down your view of all the different tasks you see. So if you want to filter by only applications or only assessments, or if you want to filter based on the assigned to. So we used that function in my trial. So if I am B. Jenkins, I can see only the tasks that have been assigned to me, which I think were the applications which were marked as complete. So right now I don't have anything to do. I've done all of my applications. So there's different different views, I guess you could say, in this master calendar. If you want to really target what you want to see. And you can focus on protocols or trials or just a selected set of files. If you don't want to see all of them, you can change the color code as well. So if I go back to none, so we can see everything. Right now, it's coloring based on the type, but I could color based on the assigned to or the different trials, quite a few different things. Type is what I would kind of like to have that coloring by. Again, master calendar, that's just doing everything in your study list, whatever that's pointed to. And if we go back into that trial, you can view just a single trials calendar within kind of the branch, if you will, of what's in this one trial with that calendar. Okay, I think we kind of covered every scenario. Checking my list, like I had joked at the very beginning, I usually get long-winded and don't have time for questions, and lo and behold, we actually do have just a couple minutes to spare. So, any questions on this task functionality? Pretty excited for the link to the Outlook calendar. That update was really nice. In previous iterations, when we trained on this, you could kind of see people get a little excited. This looks real nice, and then the question is now, how do I get this to everyone? And it was always just a little bit of a letdown at the end to be like, well, we can really only send it to your own calendar unless you do, and then you can mess around with the profile. If you made another profile and redirected what's the default calendar, all this rigmarole in Outlook, you could eventually get it to have ARM communicate with another calendar, but so clunky and so much overhead that it was not super worth it. So it's real nice now. It's just so seamless. You just pick whatever calendar you might want to use, and out it goes. And now everyone can see that. And again, that was, I think I said that once, but one nice thing with the description, that text is in the calendar item that gets put into Outlook. So whatever you might want, whatever details that you care about, might just be nice shorthand, so you don't have to open up ARM to see what exactly that application A was. Remind me what that was. I'll just put in that detail, so that way we know roughly what it is we're doing that day without having to have someone go in ARM to check. Okay, well, I guess without having any other questions, then we'll let people loose for a few minutes to spare. Thanks for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again. I guess we got one more before we take off on our summer season vacation, if you will. So thanks again, everyone.